Hello, friends. My name is Elijah W. Hadley. I have two loves. The first is my passion for dentistry, and the second is for the city I call home, Chicago. I'm going to take you on a journey that spans 150 years, showing you the growth of both my profession and my city. But like all love stories, this one has its share of triumphs and tragedies, of joys and sorrows, I myself being a classic example. The year is 1865, and it is a dark time. Our country is immersed in a deadly civil war. Ideals clashed, and brothers were pitted against brothers. I have a dental practice in Chicago. Along with my fellow colleagues, we treat Confederate prisoners of war at Camp Douglas. When the Civil War began in the spring of 1861, both the Union and Confederate armies had oral surgeons on the battlefield treating the numerous head, face, and jaw wounds that occurred. Civilian dentists treated recruits so they could perform the task in battle of tearing open a wrapper containing a ball, powder, and wadding for their muzzle-loading rifles. A simple task, yet one that often meant the difference between life and death. Needless to say, many recruits were rejected for having bad teeth or no teeth at all. Great changes are in the wind, but like the 620,000 soldiers who will perish in this fight, I too will not be around to see them. For my year of great triumph and joy, being elected the first president of the Chicago Dental Society on February 8, 1864, and presiding at the first midwinter meeting held February 1, 1865 at the S.S. White Dental Depot, was also the year of my tragedy and sorrow. On Saturday, March 4th, I departed from this life after a sickness of but 5 days. Sadly, more tragedy is to come. Only a month later, on April 14th, President Abraham Lincoln is shot. His dream of seeing the bloody Civil War end is cut short by an assassin's bullet. Illinois' hero is brought home on May 1st, and his body is laid in state at City Hall, where hundreds of mourners pay their respects. My city also pays its respects with the creation of Lincoln Park in 1865. The bitter war finally comes to a close, and although the scars would take years to heal, healing has begun. Also underway was a golden era for dentistry. Organized dentistry was starting to grow and prosper. The American Dental Association was founded in 1859, and from an outgrowth of informal organizations of Confederate dentists, the Southern Dental Association was established in 1869. Soon, more state and local organizations emerged, including ours here in Illinois and Chicago in the year 1865. Dentistry also emerged from the barber-surgeon tradition, as the need for dental education and accreditation led to more dentists becoming graduates of the increasing number of dental schools. We were finally becoming a profession. But here in Illinois, the only way to learn dentistry continued to be by apprenticeship or preceptorship in the office of a practicing dentist who probably learned the same way. Once both our state and Chicago dental societies were established, however, it wasn't long until the dream of a dental school would become a reality. Unfortunately, those dreams soon became a nightmare when at approximately 9 p.m. at 137 DeKoven Street on the city's southwest side, in a cow barn owned by Patrick O'Leary, tragedy would strike. It was Sunday, October 8, 1871, and the Great Chicago Fire had begun. Chicago dentist Truman W. Brophy practiced at 30 Washington Street, where he rented the front of the second floor for $75 a month. His practice was just 7 months old when the fire reduced the area to ash. Dr. Brophy wrote, "Somehow I was able to get my operating chair and dental library downstairs through the crowds of people fleeing toward Lake Michigan. As the flames engulfed the buildings on Washington Street, my belongings were loaded on an Illinois railway car and relocated safe and sound about 4 miles south of downtown. His chair and books were saved, but his city, my city, was devastated. The fire burned until the morning of Thursday, October 12th. Only 300 people were killed, but 90,000 Chicagoans were left homeless. Over 2,000 acres and 18,000 buildings were destroyed, and an estimated $200 million in property was lost. They say that buildings are man-made and thus can be demolished, but the human spirit is far more complex. It was with that spirit that architects from all over the world came to Chicago to plan an entire city. Using modern engineering concepts and sheer determination, a new Chicago was born. Rising out of the ashes of tragedy, Chicago became the fastest-growing city in the entire world. By the time a census was taken in 1890, a mere 19 years after the Great Fire, Chicago had expanded its boundaries from 35 square miles to over 185 square miles. Our population had grown from 300,000 in 1871 to more than 1 million. We became the railway center of America, extending our lines west to connect with the transcontinental line. Our inland port was also the nation's busiest, transporting products via the Great Lakes through the St. Lawrence Seaway and all the way to Europe. The southeast side became known as Steel City, the first steel mill opening in 1875 using iron ore from Michigan and limestone from Indiana to make iron and steel used in a variety of industrial products. Chicago's Union Stockyards opened on Christmas Day, 1865, housing up to 100,000 animals. The use of refrigeration in meat packing changed Chicago from regional leader to the meat capital of America. Coincidentally, speaking of meat, the Chicago City Council just a while ago in 1998 officially exonerated Mrs. Catherine O'Leary and her cow Daisy from all blame for the Great Chicago Fire. Who said Chicago politicians can't get things done? The post-Civil War era also saw the modernization of dentistry, with the invention of the foot-treadle dental engine in 1871 by Dr. James Morrison. Now the drill could achieve speeds of up to 100,000 RPMs, making restorative dentistry easier, quicker, and more accurate for the dentist, and more comfortable for the patient. The discovery of gold and silver in the West made these metals more available and less expensive. And with the invention of a hard rubber known as vulcanite, dentists had better materials for restorations and dentures. It was also time to make the dental education dream a reality. In 1881, the state of Illinois mandated that a degree from a dental school was necessary to practice dentistry. On February 20th, 1883, a charter was granted and the Chicago Dental Infirmary came into being. Only a month later, the first class of 18 students met in a building at 22 Adams Street. Instruction was given in the principles and practice of dental surgery, operative dentistry, and prosthetic dentistry. Faculty included W. W. Alport, a Chicago dentist credited with inventing the tooth chart for keeping records of procedures, George Cushing, the Chicago Dental Society's second president, and Green Vardaman Black, who came to Chicago in the first 2 years of the school's existence. Dr. Black was key in establishing Northwestern University School of Dentistry, serving as its second dean from 1897 until his death in 1915, but more about him later. Another school, the Columbian Dental College, opened in 1891, later becoming the Illinois School of Dentistry. Soon the college began negotiations to join the University of Illinois, and in 1901, the University of Illinois College of Dentistry was born. Diversity, expansion, growth, and modernization. These are all ties that will forever bind my two loves. These ties were never more evident than in 1893 at Chicago's Columbia Exposition. This event became a defining moment in Chicago's history and marked both Chicago's comeback from the fire and Christopher Columbus's 400th anniversary of the discovery of America. Located on 686 acres in Jackson Park at a cost of $46 million, the Columbia Exposition was viewed by over 22 million people in a period of only 6 months. Called the White City, the exposition presented American products, innovations, and cultural achievements as testimony to the country's social, economic, and technological progress. The Palace of Fine Arts is today home to the Museum of Science and Industry, visited by more than 4 million people each year. It was also here that the two major dental organizations, the American Dental Association and the Southern Dental Association, jointly sponsored the Columbian Dental Congress. The Congress brought dentists from around the world to Chicago and offered dentists from the North and the South the opportunity to socialize and discuss issues of mutual concern. Only 4 years later, in 1897, a merger took place and the National Dental Association was born. Our association had finally become national in scope and dentistry's most important advocate. The scars were beginning to heal. At the dawn of the 1900s, there were 30,000 dentists in the United States. Yet membership in the National Dental Association totaled only 362, whereas in Cook County, which at the time was a combination of Englewood and the Chicago Odontographic Society, membership was a healthy 685. National membership needed a boost, and again we in Illinois played a prominent role. Reform began in 1900 by G.V. Black, and when his son Arthur reorganized the Illinois State Dental Society to mimic that of the Illinois State Medical Society, positive effects were noted. Finally, in 1912, our National Association adopted a new constitution and bylaws and established a tripartite structure with national, state, and local components. As a result, by 1913, membership had increased to 12,000. Meanwhile, back home, Riverview, the world's largest amusement park, was built on 140 acres, opening in 1904. It was inspired by the Midway Palisades at the Chicago World's Fair of 1893. Riverview continued to thrill generations of families until finally closing in 1967. Yes, in Chicago we love our rides, or should I say our ups and downs, which leads us to our fascination and die-hard devotion to our sports teams. In 1908, our Chicago Cubs won the World Series, defeating the Detroit Tigers 4-2 and featuring the famous infield combination of Tinkers at shortstop to Evans at second to Chance at first. I'd like to say that the North Siders have been thrilling generations of families throughout the years, but I am known to be an honest man. And as Cub fans always say, wait till next year. Not to be outdone, in 1919, the Chicago White Sox changed the color of their uniforms, becoming known as the Black Sox, when they were accused of throwing the World Series. In 1920, the Chicago Bears were established as one of the founding teams of the National Football League. And in 1926, the Chicago Blackhawks became our professional hockey team, winning the Stanley Cup in 1934, 38, 61, 2010, and again in 2013. Let's not forget the Chicago Bulls. Established in 1966, they went on a run of titles the likes of which my city had never seen before, with 2 three-peats. Simply amazing. But take heart, Cub fans. There will always be next year. It is Saturday, July 24th, 1915, and what began as a beautiful morning ended in disaster. Employees and family members from the Western Electric Company boarded the steamliner, the Eastland, on the Chicago River to go to their annual company picnic in Michigan. It was the first time the ship was allowed to increase its capacity from 2,100 to 2,500 passengers. It is believed that the extra weight plus the increased number of lifeboats caused the ship to capsize, leading to the death of 844 people, more than any other catastrophe in Chicago history. Again, my city cried for her people. The Roaring Twenties were barely 2 weeks old when in mid-January the 18th Amendment, which made the sale or manufacture of alcohol illegal, became the law of the land. Prohibition went into effect, but not only did Americans continue to manufacture and sell alcohol, they drank more of it. In Chicago, gangsters held the city hostage, and Al Capone became a household name. It all came to a head on February 14, 1929, with the St. Valentine's Day Massacre when 7 mobsters were gunned down. The folly that was prohibition inspired a poet to write the following. Mother makes brandy from cherries. Pop distills whiskey and gin. Sister sells wine from the grapes on our vine. Good grief, how the money rolls in. Truly a great time was being had, but none could be finer than those being had at the Chicago Midwinter Meetings. Of course, all the Midwinter Meetings have been special since the very first in my year of 1865. But in 1929, the 65th became one of major significance when the officers of the society changed the hotel venue. The Stevens Hotel, a marvel of vastness, beauty, comfort, and convenience, had just opened in 1927. It had 3,000 rooms, a hospital, a library, a 5-lane bowling alley, and a barber shop with 27 chairs. It was the world's largest hotel, and as CDS editor M.M. Prince wrote, similar apprehension was always felt when changes were made, especially to a meeting that had always outdone itself year after year. These fears immediately proved groundless, which confirmed that location has little to do with it. It is the high character of the program that counts. The exhibitors, all 119, are deserving of the highest praise and appreciation, as they contribute immensely to our success. It appears to us that all the officers and committee people are functioning perfectly, and that they will have a great deal to be proud of after the 65th annual session is concluded. That year attendance was 12,000, making it the largest meeting ever attended. Now that was 1929 of January. Everyone was spending. The economy was booming, production was up, corporate profits were up, income was up, prosperity seemed to have no end. However, American wealth was concentrated in the hands of only 13% of the people. Meanwhile, large depressed segments of society, among them farmers, textile workers, and coal miners, lacked sufficient income to buy much more than their minimal needs. Economist Roger Babson warned, sooner or later a crash will come, and it may be terrific. On October 29th, the stock market suffered a massive loss, with stocks losing more than 40%, a drop of $30 billion. Seemingly overnight, we plummeted into the Great Depression. Things indeed did look bleak, but being a spirit does have its advantages. Just ask Marley and Dickens' A Christmas Carol. We are able to foresee the future, and believe me, things do turn out all right. As a matter of fact, that turnaround begins right here in Chicago in 1933, when we hosted the World's Fair, known as a Century of Progress. The fair highlighted the progress of civilization since the city was incorporated, and in its 2-year running, attracted 40 million visitors. At one point, attendance reached over 100,000 people in a single day. It also brought $20 million into Chicago and gave people hope for the future during the Great Depression. My healing city at work once again. And not only healing, but educating as well. It was here that the American Dental Association and the Chicago Dental Society jointly sponsored the Chicago Centennial Dental Congress. Held at the famous Stevens Hotel, it also marked the 75th anniversary of the ADA. The title of the dental presentation was Exhibit for Dentistry at a Century of Progress, the International Exposition at Chicago, 1933-1934. More than 8 million people visited the dental display. It was such an effective teaching medium that everyone who visited came away with a greatly enhanced regard for the profession and a much better understanding and knowledge of the value of good oral hygiene. Then, of course, there was the talking tooth, a teaching model in which the story was told of how a tiny pit in the enamel became a speck of decay that advanced into the dentin, ultimately reaching the pulp and ending with an abscess and the extraction of the tooth. The story emphasized there were times the patient could have saved the tooth if only he overcame his fear of the dentist and sought care. The influence of the exhibit was expanded nationwide by making colored slides of the talking tooth available through the Public Relations Department of the American Dental Association. The dental exhibit at the Century of Progress was a landmark event, an all-time masterpiece of dental health education for the public. Dentistry's image had just been given a huge boost by the Century of Progress exhibit, when in 1938 a lawsuit occurred putting the two political parties of our local dental association against each other. The members group, which was comprised mostly of faculty and graduates of Northwestern University Dental School, had as its leader Arthur D. Black, and the independent organization, led by William Logan, Dean of the Chicago College of Dental Surgery, who was also influential with the Illinois State Dental Society. The election between the two parties' candidates was so contentious that it wound up in the courts with all ballots impounded. Judge Otto Kerner Sr. became the arbitrator. Not only was a decision in the case made, but to prevent a recurrence of this turmoil, an agreement was entered into by the leaders who would divide the nominations of the offices between them. As a result of this agreement, the Intergroup Council was formed. In 1945, when the original contract expired, a new group, the Progressive Club, was created. Since the Intergroup Council had worked so well, a new contract was outlined in which the division of officers of the society was now split 3 ways. Over the years, the coalition has prevailed as a remarkable structure of cooperation and ingenuity. The organization of the Chicago Dental Society, with its 9 branch components, each with its own officers and committees, attracts and allows dentists to become involved in the society and impact the leadership and direction of our profession. That is why our political past plays such an important role in the present and in the future. The date is December 7th, 1941. The time, 7:55 a.m. The place, Pearl Harbor, Hawaii. In 110 minutes, 8 battleships, 3 cruisers, and 188 planes were destroyed. Tragically, 2,400 men were killed. By comparison, the Japanese lost 29 aircraft and 6 submarines. More than 22,000 dentists served their country all over the globe during World War II. As in the Civil War, military dentists examined recruits, and similar to the Civil War, the number one reason for failing the physical exam was based on having poor oral health. Nationally, an astounding 17% failed for this reason alone. As a result, the American Dental Association developed a program to provide corrective treatment for those men disqualified from service because of their dental condition. This plan called for local dentists to perform treatment in cooperation with their dental societies with the cost of care borne by the federal government. By 1942, when more men were needed, the Army was less particular about the dental health of its recruits. The dental standard was lowered to the point where enlistees only needed to have sufficient teeth, natural or artificial, to subsist on Army rations. When the war ended, the focus shifted, and the Dental Society's major concern was assisting returning dental officers to their practices. Many soldiers also went back to school using the GI Bill to earn college degrees, going to dental school, and opening practices in the late 40s and 1950s. As we have seen throughout this story, there is a bridge that exists between the past, present, and future, connecting and interweaving events and people in ways that sometimes appear to be mysteries, until you look closely at the facts and see that it is all just part of the circle of life. Dr. Green Vardaman Black, born in 1836 on a farm near Winchester, Illinois, is directly tied to a dental event in Chicago that happened 120 years later. Black was an early researcher on the effectiveness of fluoride for cavity prevention. Dr. Frederick McKay of Colorado sought Dr. Black's assistance in determining what was causing the staining of some of his patients' teeth, which were also remarkably caries-free. Together, their research led to the discovery that the high level of natural fluoride in the Colorado water supply inhibited caries formation. On May 1, 1956, we read the following from the Chicago Dental Society Fortnightly Review. In an impressive ceremony, a formal program took place in the auditorium of the South District Filtration Plant. Chief participants were Mayor Richard J. Daley, Dr. Gustav Solfrank, president of the Chicago Dental Society, along with the president of the Chicago Medical Society and the chairman of the Fluoridation Council of Chicago. At the close of the ceremonies, these gentlemen turned the master valve that initiated the flow of fluoride into the city water supply. The editorial went on to say, "We in organized dentistry should be justly proud of what so many of us working together over these past 6 years have accomplished as a profession. We have made a great step forward in dentistry's long, hard battle against mankind's most prevalent disease. All the generations to come who drink Chicago water will forever owe a debt to the dentists of Chicago who fought the fluoridation battle of the 1950s. In fact, the Center for Disease Control named water fluoridation one of the 10 greatest public health achievements of the 20th century." Well, the great city of Chicago continued to grow, and by 1950 we were over 3.6 million strong. With that growth came development. Expressways were being built, the Edens in 1951 and the Eisenhower in 1955. The madmen and their families required things that the old neighborhoods just could not provide. Larger homes, larger yards, more green space. People were on the move, and they were going to a place that even had a name, suburbia. That growth meant more schools, stores, and restaurants, and doctors and lawyers and dentists. Oh my. Expanding also was the Chicago Dental Society, this necessity carrying over to our midwinter meeting. As the best continued to get bigger, we found the need to move from a hotel setting to an exhibit hall venue in order to accommodate the increasing number of attendees, products on display, and of course for fire and safety concerns. In 1993, the meeting moved to McCormick Place, at the time the largest convention center of its kind, holding our meeting in the North Hall, then the Lakeside Center, and eventually in 2010 to our current state-of-the-art facilities at McCormick Place West. The 1960s saw great changes in our dental profession. Locally, the Chicago Dental Society, led by President James Lynch, came up with the wonderful idea of having a Children's Dental Health Day during the midwinter meeting. He appointed Dr. Norman Olson, a pediatric dentist and advocate for dental health education for children, chairman of the event. The public relations and planning committees worked tirelessly to make this event attractive to Chicago area children and their parents. Optimistic figures hoped for 5,000 attendees, so the event was moved to the McCormick Place Convention Hall. When 12,500 people packed the room and another 25,000 had to be turned away, it was written in the Fortnightly Review, "A momentous event in the history of the Chicago Dental Society took place on February 5, 1961. To say that it exceeded the fondest dreams of our president is the understatement of the year. These children and their parents were given a new image of the dentist, as a friend who will help them achieve better health. Every child was given a short but thorough dental health message interspersed with wonderful entertainment. The kids enjoyed free sugarless pop, milk, ice cream, apples, balloons, free toothpaste and toothbrushes, and to top it all, a prize pony and 2 Cocker Spaniel puppies were given away. The public relation boost given was tremendous, as written in the Chicago Tribune editorial pages. Now the dentist will be viewed through youthful eyes in his new image. The once frightened tot will lean back, unrestrained in the chair, to enjoy himself, secure in the knowledge that the man or woman in the white coat, holding a shiny, toy-like object, is actually a jolly fellow who wouldn't hurt a fly. 1965 marked the 100th anniversary of the first midwinter meeting. The theme, "The Century of Dentistry for Better Health," proved to be the biggest and best yet, with 500 clinicians and scientific and technical exhibits introduced to the profession for the very first time, which in Chicago is our forte. Socially, there was an informal dance Sunday afternoon, tours of Chicago sites for spouses, a centennial dinner on Monday evening, the ladies' luncheon fashion show, and of course the dinner dance, held then on Wednesday night. It was the centennial dinner that was the star attraction. In attendance were the president of the ADA, the mayor, and the governor, with the principal speaker being Lieutenant Colonel John Powers, who played a major role in the space program and also invented the term A-OK. Unfortunately, much of the 60s was far from A-OK. As for the 4th time in this century, we found ourselves at war. Once again, U.S. dentists were in combat zones halfway around the world, this time in South Vietnam. Now, mobile dental units allowed military dentists to bring their skills to the battlefields easier and quicker. For the first time, we had the use of high-speed handpieces powered by portable air compressors that took the place of the foot treadle drills I mentioned way back in 1871. As our journey has shown, history does repeat itself, as the events of the 1960s closely resembled the turmoil and conflicts our country experienced 100 years earlier. Americans debated over issues of class, gender, race, and war. Again, the crack of an assassin's bullet would change the course of history, as a president, his brother, and a Baptist minister would be the victims of the senseless violence that plagued our nation. Has anybody here seen my good friend John, who in his few short years challenged us to take the torch that has been passed to a new generation of Americans? The glow from that fire can truly light the world. Has anybody here seen my good friend Martin, who had a dream that one day people will not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character? And my good friend Bobby, I thought I saw him walking up over the hill with Abraham, Martin, and John. But our story doesn't end here, for no matter how hopeless things seem, life too goes on. By the 21st century, Chicago had become one of the most diverse cities in the world, with a population of over 3 million people, a diversity that our dental society proudly emulates, and in fact has become more inclusive. Robert Kimbrough becoming the first African-American president, Julianne Blewett becoming not only our first female president, but also the first African-American female president, followed by David Kumamoto, our first Asian-American president. And how appropriate it is that this year, as we turn 150, our president will be Dr. Susan Becker-Dorschau. As the Chicago Dental Society extends its parental arms across Cook, DuPage, and Lake County to its 4,000 members, we are continuing to grow, to learn, to reach out to attract the best and brightest from all races, genders, and creeds. Over the course of our glorious history, we have been truly blessed with great presidents, leaders, directors, and staff. And I've had the opportunity to mention but a few, For that I apologize, but by no means does that diminish the invaluable contributions each and every one who has ever been a member of our society made to our growth and relevance. For as Chicago Dental Society members, we are athletes and chefs, musicians, friends, and most importantly, family. We truly are a diverse profession. Where else would we be but in a city that is a melting pot, embracing and welcoming those same values together? The love story, which began 150 years ago, has many more chapters that will need to be written. Let the new authors begin to tell their tale. Happy 150th birthday, Chicago Dental Society. God bless.